Continuing our discussion of quadratic equations, we've seen that if we have the vertex, we have an equation for the intercepts. But what if we start with an equation that looks more like a traditional quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c, and we want to find the vertex? Okay. How do we do that? Well, we're going to use a familiar technique, modified just slightly. We're going to complete the square. So, if you remember, we don't like an a in front of the x squared, but I don't want to divide by it because I don't want it on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to factor it out. Okay. Similarly, I don't want the c on the left-hand side, so I'm just going to leave it over. Now, what is it I add here? If you remember, our d, as we called it, was always taking the coefficient of x and dividing by 2. Okay. And we add that quantity squared over here. Now, traditionally we add it to both sides, but we're working all on one side this time, so since I added it, I have to subtract it. Only there's just one thing to be careful of. I added really a times this, which means the quantity I really added is b squared over 4a. So that is the quantity I have to subtract. Then I factor Now, I don't actually care about this part on the end. What I like to look at is this part right here. Because if you compare this to the equation of standard form of a parabola, this tells us that the x-coordinate of the vertex is minus b over 2a. Now, how do you find the y-coordinate of the vertex once you have the x-coordinate? Well, the same way you find the y-coordinate of any point. You plug this back in. This gives us to warning number 12. Depending on the question, they may ask you for the x-coordinate or the y-coordinate of the vertex, or both. And you just have to be careful that you answer the question that was actually asked. The x-coordinate is always where or when, depending on the problem, the maximum or minimum happens. The y-coordinate is the actual maximum or minimum. So let's look at an example. A stone is thrown up and its height h, given in feet, after t seconds is given by this equation. It's a fact that any projectile motion, thrown or shot kind of object, will have a parabola equation. We want to find the maximum height of the stone. So, taking into account our warning, I want the actual maximum height, meaning I want the y-coordinate, or in this case h-coordinate, of the vertex. But to find the y-coordinate, you first need the x-coordinate. So I'm going to use my formula to find the x-coordinate of the vertex. Okay. It's minus b over 2a. So minus 60 over twice times minus 16. Okay. This is 60 over 32. We are working with an actual example, so it might be easier to write this as 1.875 seconds. But this is not the answer to the question. This is when the stone reaches its maximum height, but it's not its actual maximum height. To find that, I'm going to take h of 1.875. Now, I'm going to explain to you a little bit of a trick. The answer to this is 86.25 feet. Don't forget the units on a word problem. The trick I use to get this is to use the table feature of your calculator. Okay. If you go to your calculator and you go to the y equals menu, you plug in this equation into the y equals menu as if you were going to graph it. And then you go to the table and enter in this 1.875, and it will output for you the y-coordinate without you actually having to do the calculations. Now, we have one more thing we want to discuss, and that is finding the equation of a parabola given certain parameters. So suppose you're given the vertex and a point on the parabola, and you want to find the equation. Well, since we are given the vertex I'm able to fill in almost the entire equation. Because I have h and k, I just need to figure out what a is. And this is why they gave me a second piece of information, namely a point on the parabola. Because this point lies on the parabola, its x and y coordinates satisfy the equation. So let's plug them in. You notice the only variable left is a, so we're now going to be able to solve for that, thus getting the entire equation of the parabola. This tells us that a equals 1, so our equation of the parabola is y equals 1 times x plus 3 squared minus 8.